Before this story ends, one simple choice will change a life forever, and if you stay until the final moments, you'll understand why kindness is the greatest investment anyone can make. If stories like this move your heart, take a second right now to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us share more real, meaningful stories that remind us who we are. Every morning at exactly 6:15, the bell above the diner door rang with the same tired sound. It was a small place on the edge of town, the kind most people drove past without noticing. Inside, the air smelled of coffee, toast, and something warm that felt like home. Clara tied her apron the same way she had for 3 years, not knowing that her quiet routine was slowly weaving together a story bigger than she could imagine. He came in on a rainy Tuesday. The old man was thin, almost fragile, his coat hanging off him like it belonged to someone else. His hands shook as he reached for the door, and Clara noticed how he paused, catching his breath, before stepping inside. Most customers barely glanced at him, but Clara did. She always did. She smiled and led him to the corner booth, the one with the cracked leather seat and the view of the window. He ordered the same thing every day, a bowl of soup and a slice of bread. And every day, when the bill came, he stared at it a little too long. The first time, Clara noticed his hands trembling as he searched his pockets. Without saying a word, she quietly adjusted the receipt. She told him there was a discount for seniors on Tuesdays. It wasn't true, but he smiled with relief, and that smile stayed with her long after her shift ended. From that day on, Clara made sure he never left hungry. Sometimes she added extra bread. Sometimes she poured a little more soup. On days when he looked especially weak, she brought a small dessert and said the kitchen made too much. The old man always tried to refuse, pride flickering in his tired eyes, but hunger won in the end. His name was Henry. He told her pieces of his life in fragments, how he once worked with his hands, how his wife loved music, how silence felt heavier after she passed. He never spoke of children, and Clara never asked. She just listened. In her own way, she was lonely too. The diner paid the bills, but it didn't fill the quiet ache in her chest that came from dreams put on hold and a life that felt stuck. Weeks turned into months. Henry grew weaker. Some days he barely touched his soup. Clara began bringing him food before he even ordered. She paid for it herself, slipping a few dollars from her tips into the register. It wasn't much, but it mattered. To her, kindness was not something you announced. It was something you did when no one was watching. One afternoon, the manager noticed. He pulled Clara aside and warned her. "We can't run a charity," he said. She nodded, eyes downcast, but the next day, she fed Henry anyway. She couldn't stop, not when she saw how his hands shook, not when his voice grew softer each time he thanked her. Then came the day Henry didn't show up. The corner booth stayed empty all morning. Clara kept glancing at the door, a knot forming in her stomach. By noon, she felt it deep in her bones, something was wrong. When her shift ended, she grabbed her coat and walked the few blocks Henry had once mentioned he stayed near. She found him in a small, crumbling apartment, lying weak but alive. He had fallen. He hadn't eaten in 2 days. She called for help. She sat with him until the ambulance arrived, holding his hand while he whispered apologies for being a burden. Clara cried then, tears falling freely as she told him he mattered. That he always had. Henry was hospitalized for weeks. Clara visited whenever she could, bringing soup from the diner and stories from her day. He smiled more there than he ever had in the booth. One evening, with effort, he asked her to promise something. "If anyone comes looking for me," he said, "tell them I was never alone." The day Henry returned to the diner, thinner but alive, something else returned with him. A man in a tailored suit walked in right behind him. He didn't look like he belonged there. The diner fell quiet as he scanned the room, his eyes landing on Henry. "Dad," he said, his voice breaking. Time seemed to stop. The man crossed the room in seconds, dropping to his knees beside the booth. He held Henry like he might disappear again. Clara stood frozen, her heart pounding. Henry's eyes filled with tears as he introduced them. "This is Clara," he said softly. "She fed me when I had nothing." The man stood and turned to her, his expression unreadable. Then he reached into his pocket, pulled out a card, and placed it on the table. "I've been looking for him for years," he said quietly. "I'm his son." Clara later learned the truth. Henry's son was a billionaire who had lost touch after family conflicts and pride built walls too tall to climb. He had finally hired someone to find his father, arriving just in time. The next weeks changed everything. The diner was renovated. Clara was offered a scholarship, then a job offer she never imagined. She refused the money at first, but Henry's son insisted. "You didn't do this for us," he said. "That's why you deserve it." Henry moved into a warm home, filled with music again. Clara visited often. They talked, laughed, and remembered the booth that started it all. Years later, Clara would say that the greatest thing she ever did wasn't feeding a hungry man. It was seeing him, choosing compassion when it cost her something. And that single choice echoed farther than she could have ever known. So if this story touched your heart, remember this: kindness never stays small. It grows, it returns, and it changes lives. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and carry this story with you. Because one day, you might be the reason someone survives, or the reason a miracle walks through the door unexpectedly.